Hi everyone, my name is ToreiKY and welcome back to Round the Mulberry Bush. Last time we found out Maddie's still brat. She's still, being a little wild child tomboy. And okay, so I don't know, Oliver's like this does not feel like love. It feels like he's obsessed with her, which is creepy. Because he's not appreciating her, he's like, I need to possess her. And that's just what's kind of like making my skin crawl a little bit about him. I'm thinking that's what it is. I don't know. I really hope I'm wrong about this. But let's get back into it. It's the fourth year. So, on the fourth summer, Mattie had a crisis. I found her hiccuping, her eyes brimming with salty tears. Some of them dripped down her cheeks, flushed so pink they masked her freckles. That was a pity. I liked the freckles. They made her look so cute. A series of imperfections stippled across her otherwise flawless skin. They made her feel more like a real human being, and less like the austere, untouchable girl in the portrait in the drawing room. An equal, not Lady Matilda Addison, but Mattie. My Mattie. And for a few glorious moments in that blisteringly hot summer, she really was mine. She stood before me, her hands hanging limply at her sides, two appendages with no immediately obvious use, though she was sniffling, her shoulders shaking, unable to bite back the soft, girlish sobs that racked her body. She didn't use her hands to brush the tears away. Maybe her thoughts were so jumbled she didn't think, or maybe she didn't have the energy. It wouldn't be polite to ask. I had never seen Mattie look so distraught before. Not once during the 4 years I had known her. 4 long, lazy summers, time ticking away beneath the boughs of the mulberry tree. When the tears began their slow, steady procession down Mattie's cheeks, it pulled hard. She was crying, but with a certain grace and dignity, despite the flushed cheeks, the soft sniffles, and the snotty nose. She didn't howl. She didn't bawl. Instead, she tried to keep her misery bottled deep down inside, but her eyes sparkled all the same. There was something brave about it, noble. But I didn't like it. Was that just how fair ladies sobbed? Was that something her tutors taught her, slotted in between sessions of sewing comforters or playing the piano or locating Sweden on an old globe? She should have been crying harder. Wow, that's... I'm still bothered. I'm still so bothered by this. She was crying, but with a certain grace and dignity. Despite the flushed cheeks, the soft sniffles, and snotty nose. She didn't howl. She didn't bawl. Instead, she tried to keep her misery bottled deep down inside. But her eyes sparkled all the same, and I could hardly stand it. A girl like Mattie, who threw caution to the wind, and was content to gambol about in the gardens like a baby goat, should not have been minding her manners quite so carefully, staring at the ground almost shyly. Mattie should not have been shy around me. There was no need. I would have loved her, accepted her, no matter what state she was in, no matter how sodden with tears. Each and every tear that clung to her long, pale eyelashes was just one more thing to cherish. Mattie, I said, and my voice faltered, and I did not know what to say. pitted against her tears. Pure as spring water, words were rendered meaningless. But I still tried to persevere. I would never have forgiven myself if I had left her all alone to try and sniffle down her sobs. How could I have done anything so cruel? I, who loved her more than anybody else? I really did love her. Mattie, I'm so sorry for your loss. I know it might not count for much, but I know how much Crabapple meant to you, and I just wanted you to know she didn't suffer. She didn't. How do you know that? Mattie demanded, her voice indistinct through her sobbing. How do you know? You can trust my father. He's a good man. He likes Crabapple too. She tried to kick him. She nearly split his skull in two. But she didn't, and he's fine. He might be fine, but Crabapple... I know. I'm sorry, Mattie. I'm so sorry. All she did was break her leg. It was just a break. She didn't need to die. They didn't need to put her down. But horses cannot run if they break their legs, and all horses live to run. It was the kindest thing to do. Oh. That was what Lord Addison said, and it was my father said too. But I did wonder. They could hardly have asked Crabapple for her equine opinion. Even if they had attempted to, they would not have understood her, and she would not have understood them. An impasse, stalemate. It wasn't kind at all. Mattie flared up, her hands clenched into fists, her expression contorting into one hot, bitter, tear-stained anger. How could it be kind? They killed her. They killed Crabapple, my best friend. And she had a point. I opened my mouth, but my lips felt cracked, dry, and no words could wrench themselves out of my throat. No words other than an abashed, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mattie repeated, and she looked me up and down. She looked regal, noble, years beyond her true age, though she was still such a small girl, and she insisted on wearing those old dresses of hers to play in the garden. Lady Addison had purchased this dress for Mattie 4 years ago, but it still fit her, though it was a little pinched about the arms, slightly too short about the legs. It strained just slightly about the chest. But though she was at the tender age where she was beginning to grow into adulthood, she was not an adult just yet, and her horse had just died, been killed rather, and she didn't have the right to cry under such circumstances, to bawl, to scream and yell and stamp her feet against the ground and throw her pillows across the bedroom and stones through the mullioned windows. She was many things, her emotions all coexisting inside one tiny prepubescent body, and they pulled her in every which way. A fair lady, a stubborn brat, almost an adult, but not quite yet, just a little girl, and the girl I love more than anybody in the world. Are you sorry? She asked me, her eyes big and green and serious. Are you really sorry, Oliver? Her gaze was sharp enough to cut. Her words were weapons. Complete and utter devastation. I'm so sorry, Mattie. I really am. I paused. I know saying sorry won't bring Crabapple back, and I know it won't make any difference, but I really am. I'm so sorry. Oh, Oliver. And with a small sniffle that sounded like a sigh, Mattie crossed the distance between us. 1 step, then 2, then 3, and rested her head against my chest. Her forehead was warm. I thought I could hear the sound of her blood pulsating beneath her soft skin, but that was probably my imagination. It was far more likely to be the beating of my own heart, fluttering anxiously, skipping like a stone's across a pond, but louder. Far, far louder. My heart was pounding so hard, I was terrified that Mattie would be able to hear it, and she would judge me. Like, surely judge me. Her body was warm, a different kind of warmth to the summer sun that filtered through the green leaves and played across the petals of ivory daisies. It was comforting, all-encompassing, and most importantly, it was for me. Mine, and mine alone. My body moved naturally, like the motions of the moon as it tracks across the night sky. I hardly realized what I was doing when I held her close against my chest, her forehead against my breast, her body hunched over, enveloped in my embrace. She was so tiny, so small, just like a fairy. It was the first time I had ever thought of Mattie, for a few precious moments, my Mattie, of being fragile. But she was, undeniably, at that moment. She was delicate. I wanted to protect her. I let my head rest atop hers as she nuzzled against my chest, hiding the tears that streamed down her cheeks. I inhaled, despite chastising myself for the action, and surely Mattie would have found it unnerving. I found it unnerving. No, I'm just kidding. If she were in a fit frame of mind and Crabapple had not died, she would have rolled her eyes and told me I was being unpleasant. Freak. But she did not push me away. She did not say a word, even as I inhaled the aroma of her hair, tart like unripe mulberries and dirt like the great outdoors. Unwashed. Mattie hated bathing when she was younger. The prospect of being clean seemed to fill her with great disenchantment, and she would hiss cat-like when her mother fondled her limp locks of hair and told her to take better care of herself. Sometimes I needled her on the subject, asking her whether she would melt if she was caught in the downpour. But I loved her all the same. I loved every last bit of her. All the dirt and grime, the scowls and sighs, the poor manners, the puffy eyes, the bitter, sad, scared, angry tears. As I held her close, I wanted to subsume her into my own being, for the two of us to become one. A romantic notion, like something from 1001 Nights. Idealistic. I don't know if this is idealistic or I don't know if I'm being paranoid right now, but I'm scared for her. But time continues to tick on and on and on. 1793, the 5th summer. By the 5th summer, Mattie had changed. She was no longer a little girl, poised on the threshold between childlike innocence and mature cynicism. She was 13, a teenager, beginning to blossom into a real lady. No longer did Mattie wear the loose dresses of her youth, adorned with flowers, her hair a loose and unmanageable mane. She began to tie her hair back neatly, with strips of ribbon thinner and finer than the wrist of a newborn baby. She walked differently, too. Gone were the days when she was content to trapeze about the gardens like a ragamuffin. Burrs and brambles and brackens snagged her dresses, her shoes caked in mud and her stockings rucked up. She walked regally, with elegance, her head held high, as though a book was balanced atop her brilliantly blonde crown. She even remembered to pinch either side of her skirts with her hands so they didn't trail across the ground. In the space of a short, scant year, the little girl that Mattie had been vanished almost completely without a trace. Only spots and smears left behind if you knew where to look. She was changed, and changed greatly, but the Mattie I had known and had loved was not gone. She did not climb trees anymore, for fear of callousing her hands, and she did not seek me out during breaks between her piano playing, or sewing, or French verb conjugating. Still, however, our paths seemed to cross, perhaps inevitably, just like birds migrating for the winter, passing one another in the washed-out, icy blue sky. We found our way together, attracted by some inexplicable force, maybe habit, or perhaps something deeper, more inexplicable, impossible to see, but they're all the same. The roots of a tree, the mulberry tree beneath where we had idled so much of our time, eating black fruits so they burst between our teeth and the juice dripping down our chins. It was under this tree that Mattie and I had sworn quite solemnly to be partners in crime, co-conspirators against the iron fist of the indomitable Lady Addison. It was here, too, only one summer hence, that Mattie had rested her head against my chest and had cried herself boneless, her body limp. A rag doll of a girl, with unwashed hair the color of straw, and eyelashes all clumped together with her crying. I could not imagine the new Matilda Addison crying. She seemed far too prim and proper for such a mawkish affair. But still, we found one another, as though it were predestined, ordained by God. Wow, dude, you are thinking way too much into this. Why, hello, Oliver, she said, and even her voice sounded different now, a touch more nasal, perhaps. Her vowels rounder and fuller, her consonants less harsh. She was politer than she had been in her youth, but the way she spoke was so careful, so calculated, drilled into her head after several years' worth of electrocution lessons, that it sounded insincere. I think she was being insincere too. She said hello, but I doubted that she meant it, and though she smiled, her eyes did not. The old Mattie rarely smiled. The new Mattie would smile frequently at foolish things that did not deserve her smiles, her father's ineffectual bluster, her mother's petty complaints, the compliments of gentlemen paid her when they came to visit. A good deal of gentlemen came to visit Mattie now that she was nearing the age where... Whoa! Oh my gosh, she's 13. Oh, it's so creepy. To think they did that to kids. Oh, anyways. A good deal of gentlemen came to visit Mattie. Now she was nearing the age where marriage prospects were not so unthinkable. Maybe that was why she had started to smile more. She had to, even if she did not feel it like it, for the sake of her future. What man wanted a sullen wife with lips pursed and her tongue poisoned? Personally, I did not mind. I far preferred that Mattie. But she was already a relic of the past. My opinion hardly counted for much, being a mere stable hand, and Mattie let me know it too. Matilda. "Hello, Lady Addison," I greeted her with a small bow. She giggled, holding one hand up to her mouth, her lips soft and pink, the sunlight playing across them so they looked even lovelier than before. She used to bite her lips when she felt anxious, worrying them with her teeth. She didn't do that anymore either. "You do not need to be so formal, Oliver," she said. "We were playmates since our childhood, were we not?" "I was under the impression that you were a lady and I a mere servant," I said, my voice cool, carefully distant. I wished I didn't have to be so distant with Mattie. My Mattie. But she wasn't mine anymore. That was abundantly clear. She had changed too much. Even so, Mattie attempted to bridge the distance between us. She did not do so physically, as she had done last summer, her forehead against my chest and my head atop hers, but she tried to reach out with words that sounded far too accomplished, so devoid of awkward, sharp edges it disoriented. "I may be a lady, but you are still my friend," she said, as though it were that simple. Maybe. To her it was. Or maybe she was pitying me. "Do you still believe that?" I asked her. "Of course I do," she said, holding one hand to her chest. "I have missed you, Oliver." Really?" When she appealed to me, her eyes big, her voice cracked, and the round, neatly formed O sound slipped, and she sounded like the little girl I was accustomed to. She sounded like my Mattie. "Yes," she said, "I have been so terribly busy of late. I haven't had any time to spend with you. I have been wondering as to your well-being." "Then why did you not come to see me in the stables? You know where I am." Being a stable hand, my whereabouts should have been no secret. Mattie simply sighed, soft and breathy. "I could not," she said with a touch of sadness in her tone. "I would get my dress dirty." "That never bothered you before." "The dresses I wore as a child were not quite as expensive as the ones I wear now. Moreover, Mother would kill me." She said the word kill with such a ghoulish delight, her dark eyes flashing, and for that moment she sounded so much like my Mattie, the wild-haired, wild-eyed pixie girl, that my heart constricted in my chest. Then she laughed, lightly, airily, and that moment was gone. She didn't utilize her words in the same way. Her vocabulary seemed to have expanded more impressively in such a short space of time, but she had always been an intelligent girl, Mattie. She just wasn't very talkative, and she never seemed to feel the need to exercise her full command of the English language around others. It was not so now. An indispensable part of being a lady was the ability to show off one's own upbringing. It was of no use having a glittering necklace if one did not wear it, and words were just the same. There was a little point in being educated if you did not flaunt your education brazenly to everyone in the immediate vicinity. Members of the nobility you could impress. Servants you could snub. But perhaps I was the one at fault. Perhaps I was the truly judgmental one, assigning attributes to Mattie, Matilda. based on my own mounting feelings of inferiority. I was afraid she would reject me, even if she had not yet. That was why I was trying to distance myself. It was undoubted that she had been avoiding me, but I had been avoiding her too. I believe I have turned out rather well, despite Mother's initial worries, she said, her voice silly, soft, constricted by layers of cloth. She seemed much more pleased with my current conduct. A sigh. Though studying the piano is still frighteningly dull. I fear that I am not a natural. My fingers are not long enough, and they do not taper at the ends quite so neatly. And the French? She wrinkled her nose, the freckles wrinkled with it. I cannot stand it. Still? She shook her head passionately, her curls bounced. If she had been younger, she would have spat on the floor. She did not do that now. Je déteste le français. Sorry, I was just thinking about how bad my French is. I took it in high school, and man, I'm awful at it. But at least she was still able to joke, and when she laughed at her own feeble attempts at French, tinged with the unimaginably British accent, it was open with abandon. I'm sorry, she's supposed to have a British accent, of course. I'm so dumb. Free. I could not help but laugh too. Oh, Mattie, I said, shaking my head. I really have missed you. Well, I should hope so, she said smartly, once her laughter had subsided and her shoulders were not shaking. You should miss me. I'm incredibly beautiful, you know. I knew it all too well. Is that what your suitors tell you? I asked her. She pulled another face. Please, do not ask about my suitors. I am entirely uninterested. But I have heard the gossip, I said. Bertha told me. She said you got along quite well. Swimmingly, her exact words. With Lord Burlington. With that fop? I would rather hang myself than become betrothed to such a bore. But Bertha said, Bertha is an old fool with too much time on her hands. If she moved her broom with as much aplomb as she moved her mouth, the floors at home would be so clean you could eat off of them. Well, you may have a point. Indeed I do, she said. I am far too young to think about marriage now. I would rather think about French verbs than marriage. But Lord Burlington seemed keen, and you look so happy with him. I have to look happy when I am with him, or it would hurt his feelings. That is what Mother says. As though I could give a stuff about his feelings, Mattie said, sniffing. But no matter. That is what happens when you get older. You have to start lying. I was always taught that lying is wrong. Me too, but adults contradict themselves. You are also an adult, I reminded her. She sighed. Please, don't remind me. It is not something I care to think about. French verbs then? She rolled her eyes heavily with such an intense feeling it was almost as though the motion drove the sigh of long suffering out of her lungs. I love the wording and like the descriptions. Like I can see her doing this. Ugh. I started to laugh, and Mattie did too. You know, Oliver, she said, letting her voice trail away almost coquettishly. When she blinked up at me from beneath her eyelashes so long and fair, fluttering, I felt my heart stop beating for a fraction of a second. My throat tensed, and my fingers began to spasm at my sides. She had been so beautiful as a child, but she was undeniably gorgeous now, a flower in full bloom, a forbidden fruit. "What is it, Mattie?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper, softer than the brush of the wind that played through the leaves of the mulberry tree. I don't know why I started to whisper. It just felt right, I suppose. Like Mattie and I were sharing some kind of secret. Like we were small children again, our fingers and cheeks stained with dark juice, popping mulberries into our mouths, one after another. The lazy summer days continued to roll by, unfettered, the clouds swirling in the sky about our heads like oils in a witch's cauldron. I wished so desperately, I thought my heart would break, that I could go back to those days, or else stay in this singular moment forever. Mattie was older now, and had learnt to hide her temperament behind her soft smiles, how to smooth over awkward silence with that silly conversational pitter-patter, how to please her parents by bowing her head and listening and obeying, always obeying. One day, she would grow into her still ill-fitting title of a lady, and I would be left behind for good, abandoned even more surely than her old tresses, her rolled eyes, her petulant pouts. If only I could exist with Mattie forever beneath this mulberry tree. "Oliver," she said, her voice still so soft, but not quite Mattie, but not quite Matilda either, and thank heavens, not Lady Addison either. That would come in with time. "Oliver," she tried again. "Yes, Mattie?" "I would far rather marry you than Lord Burlington, you know." And though it was just a whim, a passing fancy, something that could not be and could never be, no matter how much either of us may have wished it, I found myself light-headed, drunk on the sweet aroma of the strewn mulberries and my own indescribable desire. If only I could have taken her into my arms and kissed her, and kissed her, and kissed her again until her lips were swollen and her eyes swum with tears. But I could not, because Mattie turned her head, smiling that pointed smile of hers, and avoided my gaze. Maybe it was because of my desperation was too palpable, too pathetic. It made her uncomfortable. Or maybe she had never meant it to begin with. Matilda could only say these things because she did not truly love me, not as much as I loved her. 1794, the 6th summer. By the 6th summer, we had drifted even further, more surely than the fluffy white clouds in the bright blue sky. The mulberry tree was still the same, with its gnarled trunk and bright leaves, gems like fruits nestled within, but everything else was different. Mattie was different. Matilda. And if Mattie was no longer Mattie but Matilda, then I was different too. I missed her so much, so constantly. It was like an ache, a longing so prevalent it almost brought tears to my eyes. It was difficult during the day, but at least I had work to occupy me, cleaning stables, brushing manes, slipping surreptitious sugared lumps into the sly Crabapple successor, Rosemary. Not that Matilda would have appreciated it. Mattie would have, but not Matilda. Matilda, in her flouncy dresses, her neat hair, her silly little strips of frothy ribbon, did not spend much time in the stables. She would dirty her clothes, or chip a nail, or tangle her curls. And wouldn't that be terrible? Needless to say, she did not ride Rosemary. She would have ridden Rosemary, were she younger, and she would have clamored, tugging at my hands, the hem of my shirt, for sugar lumps, or apple slices, or raw carrots to feed her noble steed. Matilda did not. Sometimes, when I tended to the poor forgotten Rosemary, a pretty mare with deep dark eyes fringed with long lashes, I would run my hands through her mane and sigh, and she would seem to sigh with me, heavy and horsey. I felt very much like that horse, though I wish I did not. I had been abandoned by Matilda too. When we were younger, we lived in one another's pockets, a phrase my mother would have liked to use. We were almost inseparable, though our respective classes would have made separation so simple, so easy. But we clung together all the same, invariably meeting beneath the old mulberry tree. Okay, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to end it here. I'm starting to lose my voice, which is not what I expected. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!